Hi guys, Hengist here from House of Hengist Comics, and a big welcome back to the channel, and I hope you're doing really well. Today, this is Blitzkrieg Episode 8, Martelange Panzer Breakout, and this follows on from Episode 7 directly. But first, let's have a look at the news, and what I quickly wanted to focus our attention on today is the Ardennes, and we're looking at Army Group A, 12th Army, including Panzer Group Kleist and 16th Army under General Busch. Basically, as you can see, they're striking through Luxembourg and Belgium towards Sedan. Now, as you can see here, there's huge columns weaving their way through the Ardennes, basically. And although the architect of this plan, this Blitzkrieg, was Manstein, effectively the person that executed it really was Gerdering, and he produced his book ACHTUNG PANZER. Also of note is Rommel, who honed his skills really here in France, and this sort of defined him. And part of the principles really engaged with Blitzkrieg are really rapidity, mobility. Even though you may be outnumbered, it's massing a critical effort at a particular point, using surprise and other mechanisms to confuse the enemy. And this was seen in the Iraq War as well, in the second phase of that war, when they used this type of approach. And so this Blitzkrieg continues today as a means and mechanism of warfare. Although started in Poland, it really comes into its own in France. We've seen the crossings, we're at Martelange, and basically we're looking again at the Ardennes, the chasseurs Ardennes, who've successfully retreated in good order, and today their forces, let's have a closer look at them. We're going to be using them basically, it's the same sort of company. We want that continuity, we like that continuity. It gives a lot more emphasis in the game in terms of the war game, and context is key. So there'll be 3 platoons again, having reinforced with 1 lost platoon. They've got artillery, mortars and machine guns, and off-table artillery, and possibly we may get through the deck some guide cavalry as well. And so that's really important as well, but they'll be green as standard, reluctant until proven otherwise. The German forces today, well, that's 2 companies basically, and we're looking really effectively at a reconnaissance company, which will have as standard its Kratschützen, armoured cars, but we got something a little bit different today. We've got the KFZ-13. These were the original sort of armoured cars. And they've got about 3 platoons of infantry, including the Kratschützen. They've got some Panzer Grenadiers and also some regular infantry and trucks, so to speak. Ultimately, it's the tanks, basically, that we're looking at as the second company. And these big beasts here, the Panzer IV tanks. So, without further ado, these are confident veteran. Let's get into the research and the set. And what we've done here, again, you can see from our work, we use a lot of temporary fixtures, like the lamps and flower beds, and we're working on pavements and all of that. So we can change the context, again, of our set. It's interchangeable, and we use battle boards and all sorts of things to try and make that flow and look as historical and authentic as possible. This is critical. For a good war game, you need lots of cover on the tables. You need lots of options. Here's a nice piece. We've got a World War I cemetery there. And we've also got a lot of cover, as you can see, even for 2 simple hills. We've tried to break it up, make it look a bit more like an aerial photo. We had to do shed loads of work for this. These are QRF and forged in battle models. I've kept the cold pack. It's a bit of a nod back to my old Napoleonic days. Difficult to find the research. And we also, thanks to Craig from Gaming Models again, he sent us over some KFZ-13s, which I've painted and prepared here, along with a huge amount of roads, which we're going to showcase as well. We'll be using Achtung Panzer. These are our rules that we're effectively fine-tuning now and finishing. Again, the battle deck provides weather, events, chance and reserves, and are great. So let's look at the mission and the deployment now. This is a sort of holding action, basically a fighting withdrawal, so to speak. 12 turns with the Belgians pulling out on turn 7, and they gain points for every turn they hold, and they lose points for every platoon that's destroyed. Ultimately, in terms of deployment, they've deployed all the way across about 24 inches in. They've got 2 platoons, one on this left flank here, and we've also got another platoon on the right flank here, which is in a trench, and trench gives additional safes. But they're separated by this dirty great field, and the 3rd platoon sits in that, so it can go either way. You know, again, as I've said, these are confident, trained troops. Then, you know, they've done pretty well so far. They fought an excellent rearguard action, and their scouts this time have their little motorbikes with them. But the Germans, well, they'll be leading off from the back of the town, so to speak, with their recon company all on, ready to go, with their tanks coming in automatic reserve, 1 platoon at a time, the turn after. Well, it's Führer weather, it's ideal conditions, good weather conditions. Basically, what we see are the recon forces moving out straight away. They've won the first turn, they're going to be moving first. They've got their recon company moving up with the Kratschützen following the armoured vehicles. We've got the 8 Rads in the front with the commander behind them. As you can see, they're moving down through the streets, which are pretty empty now. I mean, most of the Belgians have withdrawn into their houses. These are narrow roads, and that's a concept that the Belgians are aware of. If they can bottleneck this or slow it down, they've got a chance of basically getting out intact. But on the far German left flank, their little armoured cars are moving, and we suddenly see the first of a very poor performance from the Luftwaffe, who obviously conditions were very bad, failed to range in. But the mortars, the Belgian mortars from the chasseurs, are doing really great guns today. And again, their artillery seems to be really excellent. As Panzer Grenadiers move up, basically with their infantry, the Kratschützen have switched now and basically gone back through an alley and decided to dismount and move into the buildings and make another approach. When we get a sudden guard, and this is what I mean by the excitement, when we suddenly find cavalry, an entire cavalry company have appeared on the German left flank. But again, it's only got 2 anti-tank guns. I mean, the Belgians have only got 1 anti-tank rifle in the chasseur company. There's hardly any assets to take on arms, other than artillery, guile, and the spirit of Belgium, really. And the Germans start to get organised, as they always do. They're playing very well as a team, as they always seem to do in these battles. They're very coordinated. They produce an echelon and refuse the left flank. They bring fire down onto the poor dismounted Belgian infantry that are just coming out of the woods. Their Panzer IIs, fantastic tanks, we love them. With that extra road movement before they come onto the rough ground, whiz up and basically start to support that echelon line. Infantry is moving forward into the buildings and moving towards the big field that you'll see. The Kratschützen have gone into the gardens and are moving ahead rapidly and aggressively. The poor little recon platoon basically covers itself with smoke with another platoon and is there to spot for artillery and starts bringing and directing artillery, as can be seen here, on the enemy. As they move their infantry up, they're going for that corner apex to block the road and try and slow the Germans down, as their cavalry now look for an opportunity to support the left flank. Now, with this cavalry company turning up, there's an opportunity which I think was missed, to bring infantry across and try and support the other farm on the left flank of the Belgians. But then we've got the Panzer IVs as they arrive, and these are to be feared because of their firepower in close proximity and in a means to support the German infantry. And they basically, with the infantry now disgorged, they basically come out, except for the Panzer Grenadier infantry that stay in their vehicles. They start moving forwards and supporting the flanks and pressing. They're always pressing, the Germans, aggressively. Great teamwork. As we can see here, the one I see basically of the tank company directing basically his panzers and liaising very well with the recon commander. They're working very well together, as are the Belgians. But the Belgians suffer badly now as the Germans open fire with so much firepower. Some had bulletproof cover, but most didn't. And this first platoon, which is taking a huge amount of shooting, is assaulted and basically brutalised. And it survives, it doesn't quite break. And we'll see later that it's subsequently withdrawn. But the Germans are now in a position, they're getting a bit gung-ho, and they're rushing into the position forward and start to move. But they've clumped up And the mortars have missed a golden opportunity last turn, but they will strike their revenge later. As you can see, this echelon that they built up on that right flank to stop all the cavalry moving ahead, and that's also prevented reinforcement on this left flank. As we get the artillery ranging in, we get an assault, basically a counter-attack by the Belgians that drive the Kratschützen off. And again, it was the second platoon who fought a brilliant battle this day. They repel and drive off the Kratschützen, inflicting more and more casualties. But even though they've driven them off, there's more infantry now, supported by the 8 Rads, who are giving devastating fire into the building. The platoons, though, however, are starting to be whittled down, and we've only got one platoon on this left flank, and the only thing that's supporting it are mortars, which then come under basically the half-tracks do a mounted assault as the cavalry sort of gallop into action, trying to break through the echelon line and get behind them. It was very daring, very risky. They actually did really well and actually set fire to one armoured car through small arms fire and destroyed it, much to the cheers again of the Belgians. So it was really gripping stuff, but they weren't going to get through. And basically what we see now is obviously the half-tracks overrun the mortar position without mercy, break through as German infantry breaks through onto the scouts and destroys them. It's looking very, very bleak indeed, basically, for the Germans, for the Belgians. But the Belgians keep fighting back and launch another counter-attack. This time they basically they go for the Kratschützen again. And they also counter-attack, basically, the Panzer Grenadiers. And although they lose several bases, they destroy a vehicle and basically, effectively, are in a position now to drive them off if they can get fire in their turn. As you can see here, this is a great counter-attack. And effectively, the Panzer Grenadiers run into real trouble and are forced to withdraw, failing to counterattack. The Kratschützen are driven off and broken as well, in a surprising result. And 2 platoons have gone, but then the tanks turn up. The rifle MG infantry turns up as well. And we have a wonderful sort of breakout by the cavalry, which does a glorious sort of charge through the middle, only basically to really suffer in the end. And the Belgians just want to reinforce that depleted second platoon and try and get across, but the echelon line in the van with the Panzer IIs holds that, and the Grenadiers, the Rifle MG Grenadiers, move up towards the farmhouse on the left flank, now supported by a huge number of tanks, including the Panzer IVs. And basically what we then see is what we anticipated, a huge weight of fire brought down with high explosive rounds. Effectively, the 1IC of the Germans blows the 1IC of the Belgians into pieces, and we see the little KFZs massacre the cavalry as they've got into a position. The Panzer IIs have now in a dominant position, controlling that flank, and the Panzers basically break through as the second platoon effectively surrenders. Fails reaction, doesn't want to fight on. It did enough today. And as they get basically taken off as prisoners of war, you can only commend their spirit in this action. They fought really well. And ultimately the Panzers basically move off with their prisoners, basically being escorted by the Grenadiers, who are no longer green, I can assure you of that. And we see the Belgians start to pull out. The bicycle troops never got across, nor did some of the dismounted cavalry. The mounted cavalry, all that's left are the carnage of horseflesh. And it's a German victory, guys. Germans gained 20 victory points. The Belgians gained 5. Well, another absolutely fantastic game, really enjoyable from all of us around the table. It was really excellent. We commodified a number of things to try and make this action happen, and we'll be moving on to the Meuse in this sector. But a lot more coming up. And next week we're going to be in Luxembourg, and we're going to have a look at some of the actions there, and we've entitled that The Crown Prince. So we'll be examining a little bit of the role of their army, and there's a bit of a conflict actually by Luxembourg forces as well. But let's never forget the fallen, guys, and always remember to honour them and keep that history alive. So a big thanks to you all, and it's really going to be over and out from me.